Greetings ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to my channel, where I like to make audio narrations of various stories on the internet. In this video, we'll be focusing on a story that comes from the subreddit HFY, called Food for Thought Part 2, written by Level 25 Human Nerd. The original story is linked down below in the description. And, as always, I hope that you enjoy. Personal log ID 2203-2210-2234-CAN-0003. Krevnikov Alexander S. Petty Officer First Class CS5MM 06242503 1452 TST. Begin log. Day 1 aboard the Sabari warship Blood of Many, abbreviated henceforth as BOM. It's been an interesting few hours, to be sure. I arrived at 11:23 TST, where I met the shipmaster Thurasalans Heston, the BOM's captain. His profile as a primer, and I were provided by the Diplo Corps, detailed his known history and a few bits of his personality. But meeting the man, Lizard, in person was an experience. He is like a father figure to everyone around him. Patient, understanding, but firm when he needs to be. He gave me a brief tour on the way to my quarters, detailing a few of the regulations as well as providing me with one of the ship's schedules, and my own. The ship runs on a Sabari time. From what I could gather, one Sabari day is roughly 2.75 standard Terran days. A week is 10 days, and a year is 45 weeks. They run on a 2 weeks on, 1 week off cycle for active ship duty, with shore leave interspersed when available. All crew live on the ship for the duration of their service career, so the ship itself is equipped for long-term residence as well as heavy combat. Due to my unique needs, I have been granted a modified schedule to allow for regular rest periods while still conforming to the expected shift cycle. I have 3 local days to get settled in and acclimated before I begin my new duties in earnest. End log. Alex shifted back to his desk and ran his hand through his hair. He had changed out of his dress blacks after the shipmaster had left. Now wearing standard fatigues with the new Sabari glyphs added, his finger traced the new mark. The shipmaster had told him that it was as close to an equivalent rank that could be managed, but that it was granted only as an initial courtesy. If he wanted to keep that rank, he'd have to prove himself worthy of it. Dread Alpha, the shipmaster had called it, or at least that's how the translator had picked it up. Considering all that he had seen of the Sabari so far, it seemed to fit. The cook let his gaze drift from his e-scroll to wander across the room. It was large enough for several Sabari to live comfortably, but there was no sense of privacy. It was all one big room for socializing, sleeping, and even bathing, as evidenced by the large basin that sat in the center of the chamber. There were 4 large bed structures, one of each corner, accompanied by a sizable work desk and a pair of tall white lockers. There were no chairs, just plush fur mats where one could settle down in low desks. 1 quarter of the room had been densely decorated by the current owner of the bunk, with the personal items drifting outward from the bed. His own bed bore only his duffel bag and his dress uniform hanging neatly on one of the lockers nearby. It was an interesting contrast from what Alex was concerned, and he found himself admiring the collection of personalized weapons, bits of gears, tools, and materials. The scattering of what he could only guess was war and hunting trophies also caught his eye, and a banner with one of the elaborate brood crests hung on the wall over the small shrine-like area. The primer had mentioned that what little was known about the Sabari culture pointed to a tribal society that put strong emphasis on one's actions and honored dead ancestors. Alex's eyes returned to the e-scroll, using his finger to flit through the pages of information until he found the names of his new roommate. Reclocris, Dread Alpha, Hasten Brood. I wonder if they're related to the captain. The PO muttered to himself before flitting the translator unit over his ear and plugging into the silver wire into the piece that settled over his eyebrow. He had been tasked with observing the Sabari for the handlers back on Earth, and his service rating meant that he had been cooking for one of the crew shifts, namely the officers. The NCO smiled to himself and decided to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. If he was going to cook for aliens, he needed to see what they ate for himself, and what better place to observe this than the locals' mess hall. As he tapped across the code to open up the door into the corridor, he took a look back at the wall decorated and lived-in section of the room. I hope this Reckler guy is friendly. Red Alpha Reckler Chris of the Hastened Brood was delivered. Her tail whipped back and forth wildly as she ranted, and the dangerously calm male settled on the floor mat behind his desk. This is an insult, she snarled for the third time. The sight of the male still seated calmly, only stroking her anger. I am an honored amongst the Kandra, and I have slain 100 foes and tasted their blood. I have brought glory to our brood and our line. I, who broke the grip of the Tsarstia on the sigil. I am greater than all who seek my place, and yet you leave me with this, human thing. Still, the male sat silent, bored even despite her tone and outbursts. The only sign that he still was alive was the steady rise and fall of his chest and the soft thumping of his long tail behind him. You drop the scaleless thing into my den, give my title without earning it when he gives nothing in return. He is without honor, she pressed, hoping to get something out of him. The shipmaster exhaled slowly through his snout then, leaning forward over his desk and waving a hand to bring up a hollow panel. The third tenet, he said simply. Watching the frustration build on the younger female, we have been given a chance to learn, and they seek to learn from us. It is only right. As for his place, I have seen his deeds. His eyes shifted to the hollow again, skimming over the service record that he had been provided. Once again, he paused to read the awards, particularly the descriptions of events leading up to the Human's Fleet Cross. He is of the Kandra, as we are. I granted him only that which he has already earned. His coming deeds will see if he holds it. This apparently wasn't good enough of an explanation for the female, as she hissed in frustration. But father! Thoros was on his feet in an instant, his crest feathers flared. He unleashed a deep, shattering roar, with such a volume that even those passing outside could hear his fury. When the sound faded, he closed his jaw and glared down at the snout of the female. Pleased to see that her haunched forward, feathers flat, and her tail curled, satisfied with a show of submission, he crooked back down and once more, relaxing his chest partially as he spoke. You will remember your place before questioning that of others, Dread Alpha, he said firmly, waving away the hollow. Your shipmaster has spoken. His decision is made. The human is of the Kandra, and he will be treated as such. Understood? Reckler slunk on her knees and she bowed low. I understand, shipmaster. Forgive my teeth, she answered meekly, though her anger was still smouldering. Her superior gave her a grunt, prompting her to rise to her feet again and salute. The gesture was returned, and she stalked out into the long main hall that ran the length of the ship. She made a show of ignoring the looks that she got from the 4 guards by the door and began the long march to her quarters. After the humiliation, she needed a bath and a meal. Alex had to admit he was sufficiently impressed. The huge open space before him was filled with clusters of reptilian aliens huddled together, eating and socializing. 5 large fire pits served as focal points for the rings of groups that radiated outward. Aside from the pits, there were no permanent fixtures to be seen. Each individual had their own short table that acted as a serving tray as well as an eating surface. The pits were manned by teams of 6 who kept an eye on the large cuts of various meats that were being roasted over the flames. So this is where I'll be working, huh? He thought to himself, trying not to be too bothered by all the curious stares that were watching him standing near the doorway. Already his mind began taking in his options. Meat-centric diet. Open fire grilling, no seasoning, more emphasis on social aspect of food itself. No visible rank insignia on the cooks. He heard a growling huff behind him, and he turned around to spot a crewman standing close behind him, a gold translator unit fixed around their throat. You are the human you wish to eat, the Sabari asked with a tilt of its head. Alex blinked for a moment and then offered a nod, not sure if he should salute or not. I really need to memorize these ranks. Just observing, but yeah, I haven't eaten since I got on the station, he replied with a smile. The alien nodded and gestured for him to follow. leading the P.O. to a stack of table trays. Once he had one in hand, he was led through the rings of clustered diners towards one of the pits, drawing more and more attention as they went. By the time that they got to the heat of the grill, almost every set of eyes in the hall were fixed on the stranger. "We wish to eat," his guide declared, holding up a tray. The nearest pit tender took a moment to tear its gaze away from the human and offered a low bow, quickly using a long hooks to pull the meat off the grill. Once the guide had their share, it bowed its head. "I thank your service, warm suns be yours." "And yours," the tender replied. That done, the guide stepped back to and nodded to Alex to take his turn. Noting the lack of translator on the pit tender, Alex quietly asked the guide to slowly repeat what he had said. After a couple of repetitions, he stepped forward and cleared his throat. "Sket eshno nashishi," he said firmly. There was a moment of silence before the cook gave a thump of its tail and let loose a deep laugh. Apparently, its sense of humor was shared by everyone in earshot, but before Alex could try to correct his embarrassment, he felt the weight of a large slab of meat being piled onto his tray. "Ho pos vrip." No, wait. "Riprana b eshkikit. Pas bo brada asamov af." The pit-keeper gave another laugh before replying, "And yours." The two shared a bow, and Alex's impromptu guide led him over to one of the groups. Any tension in the air was gone now, and the human was welcomed to the group with a round of salutes. He made sure to return them once, and he was seated, with his hands free. "A valiant attempt, human," his guide declared, with what he guessed was a smile. "Your tongue is too small to speak our words properly, but you honour us with trying. The conjurer honours you." The sentiment was shared from the others in the group as they watched him. "Thank you. I'm Alex, by the way. Dread Alpha Alexander. Of the brood Krevnikov, I guess." There was a collection of bowed heads at the introduction. "Well met, Dread Alpha, but there is no need for such formalities here. I'm Snatchel, and this is Hestak, Norana, Gesh, and Eili." The guide replied, gesturing to each member of the group in turn. "We had heard an outsider was to serve with us. We did not expect to see you among us so soon." "Nice to meet you all. Just call me Alex." He smiled, settling himself a bit better as he looked around. "I wanted to get a feel for how things worked around here. The shipmaster's tour was pretty brief, and since I had the time, why not?" He looked over his tray and picked out a few chunks of what looked like ribs. His eyepiece told him that it was edible, and it didn't look bad, just a bit dry. Wishing himself bon appetit, he took a mouthful and chewed. "Well, it's meat. No seasoning, no flavouring, just plain overcooked meat. Can't tell if it was a bit gamey or if it was just that stuff tastes like." He thought as he worked the mouthful over and swallowed. "What do you think?" asked Snatchel, his head tilted. "A bit dry, but not bad. Could use some salt and pepper," he answered honestly. There was a brief look of confusion before Gnesh excitedly pointed at another cut on his tray. "Try this next." And so it began. Alex would try the new chunk of meat, offer his opinion, and have another suggestion to him. Soon other groups were getting involved, offering him bits of their own trays. He and some even going to other pits to find new things for the human to try. When Reckler stepped into the food den, it took her a minute to see what all the commotion was about. Her lip curled in a snarl when she spotted the human at the center of the crowd, being offered tributes of food like he was an elder sire. She found herself reaffirming her distaste for the human as she looked him over. He was short and tailless. Instead of a feathered crest, he had a pile of short brown dark fur on top of his head. Copper-coloured eyes that sat too close together on his flat face. At least he had the decency to cover his scaleless form with those drab grey clothes he wore. Her tail flicked in annoyance, and she snatched a tray from the stack, marching past the crowd to get her own food, and then muscling her way through to stand before the human. He looked up at her, and the crowd fell silent, many of those gathered giving gestures of greeting or submission at her presence. The human swallowed and offered her a salute. Her blood burned. "The shipmaster says that you are of the conjurer," she said flatly, looking down her muzzle at him. "Yet here you are, spitting on the second tenet." There was a wave of mutters and a few growls from the crowd. Whether it was an agreement or a denial of her claim, Alex couldn't tell. Reckler saw some Snatchel step forward, and her eyes narrowed with the other female. Dread Alpha, Snetchel greeted with a salute. He does not know of the tenets yet. It is not right to question him until... Third, then, Reckler snapped, her crest raising slightly. If he does not know, then he should seek out to know. Beta. The lower-ranked female bowed back from the berating, not wanting to challenge Reckler for the insult in this place. She was thankful, though, when the human spoke for himself. Sorry for stepping in it, but I can't understand you guys, he said, wiping his hands from standing up. I've just insulted you somehow. Please let me know what I can do. What are these second and third tenets? Reckler hesitated. She didn't want to answer the human, but the tenets she had just accused him of ignoring demanded that she do so. The tenets of the Kandra, the path. The second tenet states that we must give all that is given. The third states to not know was without shame. To seek understanding is without honor. She replied, setting her tray down before seating herself. You have been given much here, and yet you have given nothing in return. Alex considered this for a moment and then took off his jacket, leaving him in a slate-grey tank top, boots and pants. Reckler could see the strength in his arms now, that she felt a pang of guilt and a hatred of the human. But she buried it quickly. He is still small and weak, she reminded herself. Well, if that's the way it is, then all right, Alex replied, moving to one of the pits to find himself an apron. He checked his eyepiece to see if his supplies had been loaded onto the ship and sent a request to have a few things brought up. You all offered a share of your food with me, so let me share mine with you. I hope you all save some room for more. End of Part 2. If you enjoyed the story, head over to the link down below and support the author. But if you wish to support this channel, there are numerous ways to do so listed in the description down below. But the easiest would be to subscribe, like, and most importantly share this video with your friends. And, as always, I will see you in the next video, and I hope you all have a good one. Cheers!